Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's meeting of Planning Committee A. I am Councillor Johnny Crawshaw. I'm the chair of this committee. On my left is Becky Eads, who's the head of Planning and Development, and to the left of Becky is Jonathan Kenyon, who's the principal planning officer. On my right is Jane Mellor, who's a democracy officer, and to the right of Jane is Sandra Brannigan, who's the senior lawyer. And down each side of the table are the members of the committee. Some bits of housekeeping first and foremost. We are not expecting fire alarms to go off. If the alarms go off, we'll escort everybody out of the building. If people need to use the toilet, if you're in a public gallery, the door's just behind you and you're welcome to use that at any point during the meeting today. If I could just remind everybody to make sure that you've got your mobile phones turned off or on silent, please. And just to remind anybody who is on the committee and speaking, the room acoustics are not fantastic, and likewise, the people online, it's not always easy to hear. So if you can just make sure when you're speaking that you're speaking directly into your microphone, facing forwards to the microphone, that will really help people to be able to follow what's happening in the meeting today. Just in terms of how the meeting will run, these are business meetings of the council that are held in public as opposed to public meetings. That means we have a very clear distinction as to when we accept public participation and when we don't. I'll make that clear during the meeting, but we're not able to take any input from members of the public outwith of those times. So for the people in the room, please don't attempt to contact or speak to members of the committee outwith of those specific times. We are possibly will need adjournments today. If we do, I'll make it clear when they're coming up. And again, people shouldn't seek to speak to members of the committee during an adjournment. In terms of the way we deal with individual applications, in a moment, once I've got through the first part of the main agenda, I'll be inviting Becky to talk us through the plans that we have before us on each item. Committee members can then ask any points of clarification on the plans to make sure that they understand what the plans show. And I'll then invite the officers to provide any updates that there may be on the report that we've all had. We then come to a public participation section for the specific item that we're dealing with. We'll invite people to come and speak to us, and committee members may wish to ask questions of the people coming to speak to us. We then move to member questions, where we can ask questions of the officers around the report, any debate that needs to be had, and then we consider the recommendation that's been put before us. We always consider the officer recommendation first, and only if that recommendation is not upheld do we consider any other alternative courses of action. So I'll try and keep us clear on where we are on that as we go through the agenda today. Moving on to the agenda proper then. Item 1 is apologies for absence. I've received 3 sets of apologies and some substitutions. So Councillor Eyre has given apologies and is being substituted by Councillor Fenton. Councillor Whitcroft has been given apologies and is being substituted by Councillor Rose, and Councillor Maroney has given apologies and is being substituted by Councillor Ben Burton. Item 2 is declarations of interest. If I can invite anybody with anything that they wish to declare to indicate now. Can't see any hands, so I can move us on to agenda item 3, which are minutes of previous meetings. We have got off quite lightly recently, and then all of a sudden we've got 3 sets to approve today. So first of all, the minutes from the meeting held on the 16th of January, which start at page 7. Is everybody happy that we can approve those as an accurate set of minutes? Seeing lots of nods. The minutes from the 5th of February, which are on begin at page 17. Again, is everybody happy that they're an accurate record? Seeing nods again. And likewise, the minutes from the 20th of March, which begin at page 25. Is everybody happy that they are also an accurate record? Fantastic. So then on to agenda item 4, which is the public participation on the general remit of the committee. We haven't had any registrations for that, so I can go straight to the plans list, which begins at agenda item 5. We just have one application that we are to look at today, which is an application for the land to the south of Sugar Hill Farm, Stockton Lane, York. And I will hand over to Becky to talk us through the plans, please.
Thank you, Chair. Today we're considering an outline application for up to 380 dwellings, the local community use, associated works and access from Stockton Lane. So the first slide in front of you shows the application site. If you can just see my red pointer up there, it's your red line plan. This is all on in members packs as well. Slide 2 shows the allocation and the extent of ST7, which will be referred to. You just see up there, it's the red outline here. That is the allocation. And this is the parameters plan and the development area, which you can see both of these. That's in the detailed one here, and that shows it in relation to the access. As you can see, this isn't all of SG7, which obviously is in your report pack. Again, access in here. This is your land use parameters plan with the housing in here and your open space within here. Parameters plan that includes building heights. You can see there's 2, 2.5 in the brown and the 2.5 to 3 in the purple. And then your open space, which is part extracts of the northern part of the site here from the access, and the southern part of the site here. And again, green infrastructure plan here. I'm going to go back to this original, so your site location plan here. I don't think I explained it well enough. So this is your site location plan here. This, what I'm outlining here, is the application site in front of you. ST7 is the full of that red rectangle, we'll call it there. And I'll leave it on the site location plan for you. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Becky. Are there any questions from members just about points of clarity on what you've seen just there? Is everybody happy? Okay, fabulous. In which case then I will just invite Jonathan. I think there's been 1 or 2 updates to the report.
Thank you, Chair. So committee updates. Representations, there was a submission received from Councillor Waters further to the comments that were in the committee reports. We've provided a paper copy of that there at the end of the handout with the committee reports on. They don't change our recommendation. We don't feel there's anything in there that's materially different to the representations that we'd provided in the officer report. In terms of the scheme itself and updates to that, we received a submission from the applicants on the 6th of May, so earlier this week, and that related to drainage, archaeology, and a request to change the description of development to include gypsy and traveller provision. So just to take you through those and our position on those. So drainage was reason for refusal number 7. And the reason for refusal was all in respect of how quickly the surface water would run off the site. And we weren't content that it was being restricted in accordance with our policy requirements. There's a revised drainage scheme that's been issued, and that has a further restricted surface water runoff rate. So that revised drainage scheme would address that reason for refusal that we had. So our advice to you and our recommendation is that we could take away reason for refusal number 7 because of the updated drainage scheme. The submission in respect of archaeology explained that the developers were speaking to the council's archaeologist in terms of the amount of site investigation that could take place and where they would dig trenches and where they would do investigations for archaeology. We've discussed this with the council's archaeologist, and their advice is that the reason for refusal in respect of archaeology would still stand. There has been dialogue about the investigation that would happen on site, but the fundamental issue is that investigation needs to take place prior to determination. So we haven't agreed the full scope of that yet, and importantly, the extent of the investigation on the site has not taken place. In terms of the gypsy and traveller provision and the request to amend the description of development, that would be at the council's discretion as to whether we amend the description, and we don't feel it's appropriate to amend the description at this particular time because it would be a material change to the application and it would require it would require the environmental statement that's been submitted to be revisited, and we would have to go through the statutory consultation again on the development. So we can't just change the description of development so close to the committee date. So the recommendation is to determine the application based on the description of development that we've presented in the committee report and retain that reason for refusal. That's the extent of the update.
Thank you very much for that. We'll now move to the public participation section of today's meeting. So I've got two people registered to speak. First of all, I'm going to invite Councillor Eyre to come and address the committee, speaking as the ward councillor. And Councillor Eyre, you'll be well aware you have your 3 minutes, and if you want to just sit tight when you get to the end of your 3 minutes, there may be questions.
Thank you, Chair. I always enjoy being this side of the table. I think the other one. I will attempt to be relatively brief. I just want to thank officers both inside and outside the council. I think the papers you've got today are one of the most comprehensive rebuttals of a planning application I've ever seen in my time on committees. I think in terms of this site, it's very important to know this is hugely strategically important to our housing delivery. It delivers over 850 homes in our local plan, and getting that site right, getting the infrastructure right, getting the community facilities right is absolutely crucial to everything. And that's the main issue with this planning application, was the applicant has made absolutely no attempt to strategically master plan the whole site. I won't go into details on the reason to object. They're all in your papers: the archaeology objection, landscape objection, flood risk objection, which may have been removed, highway network management, the local plan team, active travel, national highways. The one I did want to flag was education concerns. It does mention in your papers, as was in my submission, that Hempland School is not appropriate for, is that a capacity and can't take any of these in catchment area. The two suggested schools, Osbaldwick and Tang Hall, I did a quick check from certain points of the site. Osbaldwick is a 40-minute walk for an adult and a 1 hour and 5-minute walk for a child. I don't believe either of those schools are actually appropriate for taking primary school children of this age. So I think, again, when that master planning is done, and I'd like to go away to our education colleagues, have those conversations and go, getting primary school provision on this site is important. And actually Tang Hall and Osbaldwick, no matter how many millions you give them, children are not going to be able to walk an hour and 20, an hour and 30 minutes to the local primary school. Reflecting on the process, I think the applicant's consultation was very, very poor. They announced 2 consultation events in the ward. They cancelled them with about a week's notice, refused to engage the parish council or the ward councillor in terms of rebooking those. They then re-announced them 1 event miles away from the site location with about 7 days notice. I did communicate with them and say this was not the appropriate way. They should take time, do proper consultation. They refused and went ahead anyway. There has been throughout this an urgent race to get this planning application in by December. In fact, I went to the consultation event and they made it clear to everybody that urgency was getting the planning application in by the end of December. It's never been clear to me why that was not the correct approach. What is most important for this site, for ST7 in the whole, is that we get 850 homes on this site with the necessary infrastructure, the necessary community facilities, and that can only be done by doing it as a site as a whole, allowing one part of the development to go ahead. I know there are huge difficulties at the bottom of the site in terms of transport, and the landowner there has been in dialogue with this particular applicant, and they've still gone ahead without that. What is most important is that we go ahead and get this site delivered as a whole with everything that's required for the site, the transport issues, community facilities, and everything. So I urge you to go with the officer recommendation to refuse this and encourage the applicant to engage with ward councillors, the parish council, the other developers and landowners in the area, and let's get this site correct.
Thank you very much, Councillor Eyre. Are there any questions from members? I'm not seeing hands, so thank you for your time. So if I can now invite Jenny Hanbidge, who's the agent for the applicant, if you'd like to come to the table, and I believe you have Ben Stevenson, a colleague from Taylor Wimpey, who's available to answer questions if members have any. So if you want to switch your microphone on, you have 3 minutes to address the committee. If I think you're running over, I'll just give you a little nudge to say, can you wind up? And then if you just sit tight, once you're finished, there may be questions from members.
Yeah, okay. Dear councillors, I represent the applicant Taylor Wimpey, one of the UK's biggest house builders. Taylor Wimpey have a contractual interest in the northern half of the housing allocation at Osbaldwick ST7. The allocation was recently adopted. It is a site of two distinct halves, one north of Bad Bargain Lane, this application, and one south, referenced in a moment. Each half has its own vehicular access, and the allocation policy prevents a vehicular access connecting the two halves. In short, it's a new community of two halves linked by walking, cycling, and possibly public transport, but not by car. That is your desire, your policy. The ST7 allocation as a whole is for 845 dwellings. The progress of the southern half is lagging behind the north. It is slightly more sporadic in its ownerships and has no developer currently in contract for the whole southern part of the allocation, although we understand another national house builder has some interest and continue to resolve with other landowners. We assume this southern half delay is a temporary matter, but we currently have no control over the timescale for its application. The southern half delay position was explained by Taylor Wimpey to council officers on October last year, where it was accepted by the council. Taylor Wimpey could submit an application for the northern area on a standalone basis, but would provide a master plan for the whole allocation, ensuring the delivery of the allocation as a whole is not prejudiced. Taylor Wimpey have submitted an allocation-wide ST7 master plan, and that master plan has been agreed with the owners of the southern part of the ST7 allocation, showing how 845 dwellings would be delivered. To say the least, the applicant is surprised and feels blindsided to be at committee today. Our technical consultants are currently in deep collaborative dialogue with the council's statutory consultees on matters of highways, drainage and heritage. In our opinion, a decision today with these reasons for refusal will be massively premature and respectfully suggest a 2-month extension of time to continue collaborative dialogue to resolve most of the matters that now appear as potential reasons for refusal, most of which were unknown to the applicant until 1 week ago on the publication of the committee report. From conversation this last week, it would appear some council officers have changed their minds about separate north and south applications. We maintain our approach is both valid and proactive. The two distinct parcels of ST7 are largely self-sufficient with walking and cycling connections in line with local plan policy. The council's own recently adopted local plan has housing being delivered from this allocation this year, and we are already significantly behind that delivery programme. Refusing this outline application largely on a matter of detail is out of sync with both local and national policy. We are using the outline to establish section 106 matters. The detail will follow in the next phase. Gypsy and traveller provision was discussed with officers in October last year, and it was advised by council officers' recommendation not to include gypsy and traveller references in the description of development, and that the matter could be addressed by a condition the reserve matters application.
You're on 3 minutes now, so if you could just wind up, please.
Sorry. Apologies, Chair. Today's report is another officer U-turn. To resolve this, we have this week amended the description of development, as referred to by Jonathan earlier, to include gypsy and traveller provision. We consider we need more time to understand the council's U-turn on their position and resolve outstanding issues, and that is why we have requested today a 2-month extension of time to resolve
You're
all
going
outstanding
quite a long way
matters.
over now.
Sorry,
Okay.
Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I will invite members if they have any questions first, but I feel that I need to address some of the points that you've just made there.
Yeah.
My understanding from the report is that there are a significant number of areas where information has been requested and it hasn't been forthcoming, but there is a fundamental problem in terms of the local plan makes very clear at policy SS9 that in order to be able to master plan for this site, you need to have undertaken an extensive amount of research and gathering of information so that you can demonstrate how the master plan of the whole site works with the needs of the community. And there is no evidence that's been submitted to suggest that the design is based on any sort of information gathering to inform the design. So you're making suggestions that council officers are U-turning or are in some way being misleading. I don't think that I have seen a report that is clearer and more one-sided in a sense, in so much as there is no nuance. It is a significant number of policies that have not been met. These policies were not secrets. We've been working to a draft local plan since 2018. I do not understand how developers have reached the point where they feel that they can bring forward an application which so fundamentally doesn't meet that basic premise of we need to gather all the information to inform our plan. So I would like to understand from your perspective, without casting aspersions against any of our officers, the ways in which you feel that you have met the local plan, particularly policy SS9, which makes clear that you have to have an evidence base for your design master plan.
First of all, Chair, I'd like to say that we did actually have a meeting with two of your officers back in October last year when ourselves and Taylor Wimpey did actually present to the officers at that time a very clear framework and master plan design. And that was focusing on the ST7 allocation as a whole, but also focusing on the northern parcel. And we made it explicitly clear at that point that it was just the northern parcel that Taylor Wimpey were seeking to bring forward with an outline application. So hence, that's why we've referred to the fact of a U-turn and a change in officer opinion, because at that stage we made it very clear that was our direction of travel, that we were seeking to develop the northern parcel only. And we had our technical team also in that meeting. So we don't understand why there has been, as we've expressed it, a U-turn when it was made very clear at that meeting, and also through the submission of a screening opinion before the application was made about the desire to just develop the northern parcel.
But to be clear, you didn't enter a pre-application process.
Well, we did have a meeting. There was requests made.
There's a formal pre-application process. You didn't enter into that, I understand.
We tried though, didn't we?
Well, it's not. The council doesn't refuse to enter the. I mean, there is a formal process for pre-application, and I don't believe that you entered into that. Of course, yeah.
Hi there, I'm Ben Stimson. I'm the Strategic Land and Planning Manager for Taylor Wimpey. I think back in, I believe it was August, a letter was submitted with a pre-application request to the council, requesting basically pre-application discussions on just the northern part of the site. We got no response initially. We did chase that up via email with officers. And I think, as Jenny alluded to, there was a virtual meeting set up in October where we met with officers and various people within the council. But despite further requests, there was nothing further to that process. So we attempted to go down the pre-app route, but were unsuccessful.
Okay. Are there any questions from other members of the committee? Councillor Burton.
Yeah, couple. One of them, I mean, it's designed as obviously I'll just do it in the northern part of the scheme, so that's designed there. So one of the core problems that's been raised in terms of public open space is the decision not to include any major pockets of open space either in the centre of the scheme, or looking at the master plan, there's kind of a green route that goes through the centre, but it doesn't really provide the kind of design intention for how people would access between the two sides. So I just wondered if you could kind of talk me through what the kind of design thought was for developing public open space, and also in terms of the density of the scheme, that's far below. Once you actually take into account the net development area, which is how you typically calculate, it's quite far below what would be required, as Councillor Ayres raised, in terms of the number of houses required. It would need to be much denser than what's provided. So I just wanted to know why that density has been picked in terms of what's been brought forward, because it's not sufficient to meet the needs of the plan.
Just pop your microphone on, please.
Yeah, obviously, in the evolution of the design for this scheme, the density was considered, and looking at what we need to be working with in terms of, access, etc. The applicant felt that what we were proposing here was the right amount of housing for this particular parcel, because the northern parcel is smaller than the southern. And in terms of open space, etc., that has been designed, but is indicative at this stage, and it is something that obviously we can work on and focus on more at the reserve matters stage.
In terms of the density, it's probably worth adding that when you take the northern parcel and the southern parcel proportionately, the northern parcel, if you do the calculations, at 35 dwellings per hectare, which I understand is where what we should be achieving. The total number of units on that northern parcel should be about 372. Our application seeks planning permission for 380, so I'd suggest we're very much in the ballpark of where we need to be in terms of numbers on the northern parcel. Again, just picking up on the public open space issue, I think the initial design thought was we tried to make the most of the green buffer along Bad Bargain Lane and focused the green space there. I appreciate the application is in outline. We are open to discussions about elements such as this, and we had previously requested kind of an opportunity to discuss matters such as this with the council. So we don't think it's necessarily a reason for refusal at this stage. We are open to working with the council to get something which is acceptable.
Okay, I'm not seeing further hands. I'm just going to pick up, I don't want to prolong this particularly, but you've asked for a deferral. That would seem to me to fundamentally miss the point of what the report is saying, which is that you cannot have brought forward a design that unless you've got the evidence base behind it to be able to demonstrate how the whole site will deliver the facilities. So, you know, the local plan team on page 38 says strongly object to the lack of master planning for the whole of the ST7 site, which is contrary to policy SS9 of the adopted local plan, and it doesn't facilitate sustainable development of this allocated site. If you haven't got the evidence base to inform your design, I do not understand how you think that a 2-month deferral would in any way change the position. If policy SS9 has not been met now, how do you think it will be met in 2 months' time?
The request being made for the 2-month extension of time really is for us to look at the reasons for refusal, and as Jonathan's already mentioned, we have already submitted some information on drainage and archaeology on the geophysical survey. So it'll allow us more time to consider the remaining reasons for refusal. And we just feel that we haven't, you know, that this application has been with yourselves now for 14 weeks. And, you know, it's only at this very late stage now that we were being told that it's not acceptable, that they won't take forward the scheme on the basis of it's just the delivery of the northern parcel only. And we just feel that we'd like to have, if possible, some you know, collaboration with Jonathan and officers to discuss the reasons for refusal and just give us that bit more time to work on the scheme.
It's worth probably pointing out there has been a report by Turley submitted with the application, and that's a summary of a social value audit that we undertook. So there's a 17-page document which has been submitted with the application, which has been informed by a social value audit. I appreciate that the larger document probably hasn't been submitted or passed to the public into the public domain, but the summary report that has been submitted has been informed by looking at things such as health, access to education, and other matters, which I think a lot of these concerns could probably be addressed by.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rose, quickly.
Yeah, I confess, Chair, I'm a bit perplexed by, I mean, the application, but the comments that we made around being blindsided, the kind of 11th hour sort of comments around this being a surprise. The kind of questions and comments so far have been surrounding the very top level of failures, but it is pretty clear there's just a breadth and depth of failing to meet policies here across just lack of sports provision, community provision, health, education, all these areas. And it's very clear this site is a garden village site that's not part of the urban area. And there's just no provision for anything in here. And you know, residents, councillors in the city are pretty clear that amenities and infrastructure need to be part of every application. And I just want to try and get your take on it. And that's why I'm asking at this question, at this point. why you think this does meet any of those, why you are surprised at this point that there are suggestions that we don't meet these policies in this application, given that there is just an absolute desert of any of this stuff in the local area. Is it because the local plan was recently passed and you think it suddenly means we have to accept everything? Is it because you think that we can just have a bunch of money thrown at the problems through S106? What makes you think that those areas are met that are called out in this report as being very obviously not met?
I think it's. I was going to say, I think we obviously try to engage early doors and through the pre-app process and didn't get very far. We've submitted the application thinking that it's covering the principles of kind of what's needed, but the blindsided element comes from the fact that we've had no engagement with the council officers to date on the matter, which we would have fully expected. We're not opposed to delivering or providing the services required. I don't think it would, if we did provide and have to amend the application, it wouldn't fundamentally change the description of development or what we're proposing. There are changes we can do within the scope of this application that would allow us to tick the boxes needed to sit here and categorically state that, yes, we think the policies are met. We're just not at that stage yet because we've not had that dialogue with officers.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to your point, Councillor Rose, on the blindsiding reference. In that, we just mean we've just had no dialogue with the case officer, and we feel, particularly at this stage of the process of this application, that, you know, as Ben's rightly stated, that we've just had no dialogue with the officer or indeed officers.
I'm going to interject there because you are repeatedly making aspersions against officers who are not in a position to respond. I'm whispering away here because my understanding is that what you are stating is not correct, and we are in a public setting. We are on webcast. We will be recorded, and it will be very easy to look through and find where correspondence has happened. You may not agree with the correspondence that you've received, but I think I can be fairly confident in saying that I have never, ever had an application that has come to us, whether it's a householder application or a major full application, where officers have not entered into dialogue or discussed or responded. And to keep making that assertion and naming people, I don't think is appropriate. If you feel that you have got an evidence that demonstrates that you haven't had the correspondence that you think that you should have, there are routes to address that. I don't think in a public setting, in a public meeting, it's appropriate to keep repeating that. Okay. Are there further questions from members, or are we happy? Okay. I'm not seeing further hands, so thank you very much for coming today. And if you want to take your seats back in the public gallery. Okay, we move now into members' questions to officers. Ordinarily, I would invite people to ask any questions that they wish, and then move us into debate, and then move us to recommendation. I have to say, I have never seen a report that has so many local plan policies that have not been met, so many responses from external bodies that are raising concerns or indeed objecting. And I think, all right, we've lost one of the 7 reasons for refusal, but there are 6 reasons for refusal, which is significantly more than there often are. So I don't wish to curtail anybody's questioning if you do have questions, but I would also perhaps invite that if there are questions, they need to be questions that will make a material difference to the outcome here. So unless anybody has anything sort of significant that they wish to check, my proposal would be that actually we go straight to testing the officer recommendation. And I, from the chair, am more than happy to recommend or propose that we follow the officer recommendation. And I cannot emphasize enough how bad this application is and how poor the evidence base that's been provided appears to be as well. I'm sorry, I didn't see which of each of your hands, but I'm going to go to Vice Chair first, Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to second the recommendation. In my 15 years on planning committees, I think this is one of the least acceptable applications I've ever seen. I've heard nothing tonight that changes my view that the officer's report, the recommendation in the officer's report is right.
Thank you. Councillor Mellor, did you want to say something?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I also put my hand up to second that. I usually wouldn't be comfortable with making a decision without having full debate, especially on planning where it is a balance, but that I don't see how there's anything to discuss here. There's nothing that could tip that balance because it's so firmly weighted in one direction and so clearly explained what the reasons are behind and how, yeah, the strength of that weighting.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Watson.
Just on a point of information, Chair, one of the reasons for refusal has dropped off. Would it assist if you just made clear to the meeting which that reason is?
Yeah, it's refusal number 7 in the list at the back of the papers. So my proposal is that we accept the officer recommendation to refuse on the 6 grounds, grounds 1 to 6, and we lose ground 7. Okay, so Becky, do you want to just summarise and then I'll take us to a vote?
So the application is recommended for refusal. The reasons for refusal start on page 76 and go over to page 78, but we are losing the 7th reason for refusal with regard to surface runoff rates.
Okay, so by show of hands, all those in favour of that proposal? Okay, that is unanimous and that application is therefore refused for the grounds set out. And I'm just going to take the opportunity to thank officers for a very thorough report that it was very, very clear. That's the end of this evening's meeting and thank you all for your time.